All right, so if you decided to play the London system, congratulations. I think it's a good choice. Um, I'm looking forward to playing it a bunch myself. And I think as we learn how to play it, there's some move order considerations that we need to figure out. And the way I see it, there's two main move order considerations. The first one is whether you're going to bring your bishop out to f4 right after you play d4 on move 2, or whether you're going to wait and bring your knight out on the second move, knight to f3, and then on move 3 bring your bishop out to f4. And I'm actually going to be covering that topic in the next video, part 2 of this move order consideration series in the London. But basically, the main thing that comes down to is your choice of what you want to play against the fianchetto defenses by black. So it kind of depends on your choice against the Grunfeld and the King's Indian defense. And it also kind of depends on how much flexibility you want for the future. But today I wanted to cover move order considerations for handling a quick queen to b6 by black. And we'll kind of switch over and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So basically, if you're playing the London system, you know that you have this pawn triangle. You get your dark squared bishop outside of that pawn triangle. And so basically, as far as move orders go, this is move 1 all the time. Move 2 will either be knight to f3 or bishop to f4. And then once your bishop has gone to f4, the next move will always be e3. At least that's the most common way of doing it. And that's the way I'm going to cover it in these videos. But then your best move order, because what can happen is black will move their queen out and try to attack your pawn on b2. There's two different move orders that you need to be aware of that it's important to be kind of precise on. And the one you choose depends on whether you move your bishop out right away on move 2 or whether you already have your knight out on f3 before you play bishop to f4. So let's cover the first example as if you already played knight to f3. So maybe on move 2 you played knight to f3 and then you played bishop to f4. And you can actually use this move order as well if you played bishop to f4 out early too. That's perfectly fine. Obviously, if you move your knight to f3 on move 2, then this is the only move order option that you have, and it's called the two knights tabia. So let's look at that quick and see how that comes about. So basically, once white plays knight to f3, they have to do the two knights tabia. And what the two knights tabia, how that works, the important thing to remember is you, as white, you hold off from playing you hold off from playing c3 until you have played knight b to d2. So basically, you don't want to play c3 until you've played knight to d2. And the reason why will become clear when we cover the triangle tabia. But basically, in this line, if it kind of continues down a typical path, we do our move knight b to d2, right? We make sure we do that before we play c3. And the idea is if black plays queen to b6 now, a couple things. I mean, we can get our knight out to b1, but like right here, we could actually just take the c pawn, and now this b1 square has been vacated for the rook, and it's covered by the knight and the queen. And this actually is good for black. So This might be a typical way that would go. Yeah, it works out fine for white. So alternatives, instead of the queen going there, the queen could, I guess, take on a2. White would just kind of continue, same way. And these are actually, well known to be pretty good for white. And so because of that, if you use this two knights tabia, black probably isn't going to try these early queen to b6 ideas. It just kind of nips it in the bud. I suppose we should look at too is like what happens if before even playing knight to f6, if black just charges ahead with the queen. Well, in that case, we play knight to c3, and the idea is this c7 square is going to become a major problem. So you're actually threatening white. We're threatening to play knight takes d5 right away, right here. If black was foolish enough to take there, obviously would just take on d5, and this is just a nightmare. Let's say black said, let's try to play knight to f6 and give support to the d5 pawn. Well, in that case, we would just push our agenda on that c7 pawn right away. And even if black tried to, say, play e5, doesn't work. We just take it. So the two knights tabby is pretty easy. All you got to remember is that you play knight to d2 before you play c3. Now it gets a little bit more complicated if we do the triangle tabia. So I want to look at that next. So when we look at the triangle tabia, I think it's probably most helpful actually to see what happens when we use the triangle tabia incorrectly. And the triangle tabia is just when we set up our triangle first. We play, c3 earlier. And it's important that we only use the triangle tabia when we play the bishop to f4 on move 2, and we have not played knight to f3. So let's pretend that we got confused and we used the triangle tabia, where we try to set up this triangle structure real quickly. Let's pretend that we played that when out of a different move order. Let's pretend we did it when we played knight to f3 on move 2, and let's just see what happens. So we'll pretend that we're playing this triangle, and so we think we're playing this triangle tabia, and we incorrectly use it after we've played knight to f3. Well, in that case, black will use his plan of bringing out queen to b6 to quickly hit our b2 pawn. And the preferred way that we would like to respond to this move is to play queen to b3. And that just doesn't work in this situation, and we'll show why. But one thing to note is that the likely move from black is going to be c4, and it is not good for us to take queens. It's actually bad, because what it does is it makes this rook stronger because it opens up that file for the rook. So that rook went to an undeveloped piece to suddenly it's like a developed piece, more or less. And the other thing is it lets black have this easy idea of playing b4, b5, and that's just not good for us. That's actually a plan that we use in some other lines when they play a Slav type structure against us. But even if we were to try to think, oh, well, we'll just play a3 to stop this b5, b4 plan, well, he's just going to play b4 anyway because of this pin. So that's something just to mention as long as we're in this position, because strategically, that's a bad move for us. We do not want to take. And because we don't want to take, if he hits us with c4, we have to come back to c2 to maintain protection of that pawn. So ideally, what we would like to do in this structure when he plays c4, let's just say he made a bad move, actually, which would be like e6. Well, what we want to do is we want to play b3. And that way, if he takes, we've improved our pawn structure. We have one pawn island, he's got two. And, you know, if he didn't take, then we start pounding him on c4. So that's what we would like to do. But unfortunately, because we mixed these two tabias up and we played knight to f3 before we set up our triangle structure, black can actually hit us with this tricky move, bishop to f5. And the interesting thing is we can't get away with taking this bishop because he'll play queen to b2. And he's hitting our rook. He's going to take our rook. We can't take the d pawn. And so he's just winning here. And if instead, if instead of taking his bishop, we drop back to c1, well, that's not great for us either because we've just spent 3 tempo getting our queen to c1. So, you know, he accomplished his goal of getting his queen out and pounding on that b2 square, and we had to put our queen in a passive position. So we want to avoid this kind of thing. So let's kind of look at what happens if we do the move order correctly. So we would use this. In the move order, we play bishop to f4 on move 2. And then the important thing to remember is we kind of keep this king's knight over here at home. So if he tries going down the same kind of thing here, well, actually, yeah, the same thing. Let's do this knight to f6 because that's what he had in before. Well, the key is we play knight to d2, knight b to d2, before we play knight to f3. And that way, if he brings his queen out trying to hit on our pawn like he did before, now we can actually get away with playing queen to c3. Because his trick of playing bishop to f5 doesn't work anymore. We can just grab it, because if he comes down here, we have this square b1 for our rook, and it's protected by our knight and our queen. So he's just lost material. So he can't get away with it because we have a spot for our rook. Now let's say, well, what if he tries to get tricky and he tries to do that, let's say, a move earlier. So instead of playing knight to f6 here, he says, well, I'm going to just kind of bum rush him right away. Well, we still just play our queen to b3. Now if he comes here, this is kind of cool. There's a big difference here. And you note that the difference between when we did it right versus when we did it wrong is before we had our knight here, and that gave him time to play knight to f6 after we played knight to f3. Well, in this position, those knights, neither one of them have moved. Our kingside knights haven't moved. So we do our typical idea, play queen to c2. Now, when he tries to do his trick of bishop to f5, we just grab it. He comes down here. He's threatening our rook. Now the key, we take on d5 because black doesn't have f6 in yet, because we didn't waste that tempo playing knight to f3, which let him play knight to f6. So now, if he grabs our rook, we just calmly slide over to b5, and we're hitting c7. We're protecting the knight. We're ready to take on c4. And this is actually a much better position for white. So that is the triangle tabia. And so the important thing to remember in this triangle tabia is that we do not develop this kingside knight. The important thing to remember is that we do not want this knight developed and to play c6 before we have played knight to d2. That's the kind of key takeaway there. So it's a lot to kind of take in, but if you watch the video a few times, it'll make sense. And then some of these, you might be wondering, like when you start studying the London, the move orders may seem a little bit odd. Or if you end up playing games and they play queen to b6 and it becomes a problem, then maybe watch this video a couple more times, and it'll kind of solidify why you got to kind of pick one of these tabias. Now, there's other ways that other people have gone about it. Like some people will play like c3 on move 2, and if they play c5, they'll just do d takes c5. Not saying these are the only two ways to do it, but these are the two most common ways of handling this issue of having your b2 pawn getting hit by b6. So there's just a couple other things maybe to look at. One thing would be is, okay, what if he just kind of sits there with his queen? When is it okay for us to take his queen? Because we just saw that we didn't want to take his queen. Well, there's kind of a little general rule of thumb, and let's just try to get to a position here where we have the standoff between the queens. Well, basically, if this b5 square is available for your bishop to play after you exchange queens, then it's usually safe to exchange those queens. Now, you may not necessarily want to do it. It's not the best move in all circumstances, but so like if you notice, like if they play c4, well, then you can't get your bishop to this square after the exchange because that pawn gets in the way. But let's say they play some other rando move. Well, now that b5 square is available for your bishop. So you could technically exchange here, and you're not going to be worse or anything. You'll be all right. Or let's say they played bishop to f5. Well, you could take there too, I suppose. So that's kind of the key thing to just be aware of, if you got in that kind of situation. If that b5 square is available for your bishop, you can get away exchanging queens. So just note that if they've played c4, that wouldn't be the case. So then I guess one question would be, well, why would I want to have to kind of keep track of all this to play the triangle structure if I can just play this two knights, the triangle tabia, if I can just play this two knights tabia and not have to remember that I need to develop my knight to d2 before I play c3 if I've played knight to f3. So like when you play the triangle tabia, you got to remember that you don't want to combine knight to f3 and c3 before you have knight to d2 in. And it's also might be good to remember when this exchange of queens is okay. And so you might be saying, well, why would I want to even bother with that? Well, there's one potential reason is there's an additional kind of positional setup that you can use in the main line of the London if you use the triangle tabia. And it's a line that Kramnik used to play. And I'm actually leaning towards doing it that way myself. I think as an adult improver with limited time, it's a kind of an easier line where you don't have to know much theory and you just get a slight advantage and you just play chess. And that line goes like this. So you see we're playing our triangle tabia here. And now we've gotten into basically the main line of the London system. They can also play here, but that's not as good for them. The more challenging move for them is to play bishop to d6. And by playing this triangle tabia and not having developed our knight yet to f3, it allows us this additional system that we can play, additional line available to us, where we just take there and then we hit him with f4. And this cuts out, a lot of stuff that we need to know. And I mean, the general idea is just saying, well, this bishop is better than this bishop, so I'm just going to have this slight positional edge and just play chess. And it's probably not the most pleasant position for black to play. It's not too hard for us, and if you get experience in this position, well, it's probably pretty effective. And so that's the main reason that I've figured that somebody would want to play this triangle tabia instead of the two knights tabia. And I'm actually leaning towards sticking it with the triangle tabia and just playing this f4 idea till I get more experience and want to like expand, different, add on different systems and whatnot. So just a really fast recap. This runs into this problem right here. And that's because we moved our knight out to f3, which allowed him to get his knight to f6. And we played c3 before we played knight to d2. So if we want to play the triangle, we need to do it from this move order. And that allows us to play that Kramnik positional line I just showed you where we play f4. So it allows us to play that. And interestingly, I looked up the statistics on this line in the Lichess database at the 2000 and 2200 level, and it actually scores 10% better for white. So I think it's a pretty good system to consider, especially for adult improvers that have limited amount of time and don't want to have to try to memorize all kinds of stuff. I mean, the memorization ain't too bad in the London anyway, but this cuts it down even more. So, and then the other thing to remember is just don't combine c3 with knight to f3 before we have played d2. That's like what you don't want to combine the two knights in the triangle. You got to do one or the other. So you just do not want to play c3 and knight to f3 combined before you play knight to d2. So I know it's a lot of information, but I think it's actually really important stuff. And if you have to watch it a few times for, to kind of like catch all the nuances, it's just kind of, it's a good thing to know and be aware of, because otherwise this queen to b6 stuff is not fun if you play the move order incorrectly. So it's not that hard to play the move order correctly if you understand the ideas and kind of the history of it, and this little bishop to f5 trick for black. So anyway, I hope you found that useful and got something from it. I think the London system is a good choice, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about it and playing it myself. So anyway, take care.